In 2020, the US GDP was $20,893,746,000,000. This is both the total amount of spending everyone did on goods and services made in the US and the total amount of income earned by selling those goods and services. In his emphasis on the importance of the circular flow of income, John Maynard Keynes put GDP in the center stage of his theory. When people believe the future of the economy is looking bleak, they will reduce their spending, and this will reduce gross domestic product. To model this, economists who came after Keynes formalized this concept into what we call aggregate demand. To make things simple for us at the start, let's say we have $20 worth of total spending. What can we say about the price level, the average price of final goods and services in the economy, and real GDP, the inflation-adjusted value of those final goods and services? Well, we have an equation which relates the two, the quantity theory of money. The quantity theory of money says that M, the money supply, times V, the velocity of money, is equal to P, the price level, times Y, real GDP, or output. To help us see how this is going to work, I'm going to rearrange this equation by dividing both sides by Y. When I do that, I get that P is equal to M times V divided by Y. This is the same equation, just rearranged. The numerator, M times V, tells us the total amount of spending in the economy. Since we know that the total spending is $20, we can replace that in the equation. And now we just have two variables left, P, the price level, and Y, real GDP. Now we can graph this equation and see what it looks like. Our graph has two axes. The vertical axis will represent the price level, P. The horizontal axis will represent real GDP, Y. Remember, each axis is just a number line, and any point on the graph represents a pair of values, one for real GDP and the other for the price level. If we knew that our real GDP was 20, we could figure out what the price level is. $20 divided by a real GDP of 20 is 1. And so one of our points on our curve will be here, where real GDP is 20 and the price level is $1. We can plot points for real GDP of 19, 18, 17, 16, all the way to 10. If our real GDP was 10, that would mean our price level has to be $2. And on we go. If our real GDP was 5, the price level would be $4. If real GDP was 4, the price level would be $5. A real GDP of 3 has a price level of $6.67. A real GDP of 2 has a price level of $10. Again, just plugging in that value for real GDP into our quantity theory of money equation and getting P, the price level. And of course, a real GDP of 1 would have a price level of $20. Every point on this line represents a different way of spending $20. It could be that our price level is high, which means $20 of spending doesn't buy much real GDP. Or it could be that our price level is low and $20 goes a long way. But this curve on the graph is what we call aggregate demand. But let's consider what happens when we increase the amount of money spent. If instead of $20 we spent $80, then a price level of $20 would go with a real GDP of 4. And that point would have to move over. So would all the other points. This is a shift in our aggregate demand. Increasing the total spending in the economy shifts aggregate demand to the right. Because we're dealing with amounts in the trillions of dollars and a narrower range of price levels, when we draw out the basic version of aggregate demand, we tend to just focus on the main part of the graph where the economy is likely to be. This is how aggregate demand will look going forward. But keep in mind that this is still the same thing we just graphed out, narrowed down for practicality. Aggregate demand represents the total amount of spending in the economy. By total spending, I mean the market value of all final goods and services produced and sold, which is the same thing as nominal GDP. So aggregate demand, AD, can be represented by the expenditure method of calculating nominal GDP. Aggregate demand is equal to consumption spending plus investment spending plus government spending plus net exports, which is spending on exports minus spending on imports. Once again, for the US in 2020, this total was almost $21 trillion. So when we graph aggregate demand, the curve we draw represents a fixed amount of total spending, where every point on this line represents the same level of nominal GDP. There are many ways to increase total spending. More government spending, decreased taxes, increases in the money supply, lower interest rates, higher incomes, more consumer confidence, and positive outlooks can all have an impact on M or V, either directly by changing the money supply or by changing the rate of spending, which is the velocity of money, V. Notice that our top two items are the Keynesian prescription for an ailing economy. If the economy is in a recession, Keynes recommended more government spending and lower taxes, both of which will spur on additional spending and increase our nominal GDP. This shifts aggregate demand to the right. Alternatively, you can decrease aggregate demand by doing the opposite of these things. Keynes believed that the cause of recessions, a negative outlook causing us to take cautious action and reduce our spending and investment, can create a shortfall in aggregate demand, reducing total spending and shifting aggregate demand to the left.